Hello, 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 hello. Welcome back to the Connected Wellness Podcast. I'm Rachel Ann. I'm here with the lovely Marianne, and we are so passionate about wellness.
Here in this podcast, we look at the ways our physical, emotional, and spiritual health is all connected and how we
Mhm.
can take better care of our whole selves holistically so we can live our best lives. We're really excited that you're here with us on the journey. Welcome back to episode 54 of the podcast.
Yes, 54. Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Wow,
we're
wow,
just
wow.
cruising.
We really
Mm-hmm.
are. Time flies.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, Rachel Ann, there's a lot going on in the world. There's a lot going on for, I think, everyone I know personally, right? And
Mm.
individually. There's just like so much going on. So we wanted to talk today about resilience.
Yep, yep, yep,
Yeah,
yep.
this like essential trait, skill, um, practice maybe that can kind of help us deal with these difficult times.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's frustrating that we have to be resilient because that typically means that there is something negative or harmful happening that is causing us to respond. So we want to acknowledge that. And there's a lot of things happening in where Marin and I are located, or in the United States. There's a lot of things happening here with the new administration. There's a lot of things happening around the world. And there's
Hmm.
also a lot of things happening in our individual lives because we still continue to have our everyday stressors. Now we just have
Hmm.
many more stressors, both in our lives and maybe outside of our lives. So I think resilience is definitely a timely topic for right now.
Yeah. But you said it means like that bad things are happening, but whether it's, the current political state, current conflicts, whatever it is, like Jesus told us, you will have tribulation. So,
Yeah.
whatever is going on, whether it's big, small, grand scale, micro scale, like we're going to have stuff. And so that's why I think resilience is so important, right?
Hmm.
Because we'll talk about how resilience doesn't mean we don't feel the impact of the stuff that's happening, but we don't get stuck in it, right? And we're
Yeah.
able to move forward. So I think it's important.
Yeah.
Um, but let's start on a high note with some wellness wins. Do you want to get us started?
Yeah. So my wellness win is the other day, it was over the weekend actually. I just had a moment where my brain was like, "Hi, you really need to rest. You are literally burning out right now in this moment." And I was like, "That's interesting." And I was looking back at my week, and my week just had a bunch of ups and downs. Um Hmm. Nothing super, super massive and huge, but
Hmm.
there were multiple stressors and multiple like changes in my routine. And I think by Saturday, my brain was like, sis, like you are in need to just sit in this space and rest and just rejuvenate. And my husband and I, we had plans to do some cleaning of our apartment. And I was like, husband, I am not trying to get out of this cleaning time that we have scheduled literally for today, but this is what's going on with me right now. And he was like, absolutely, go into the bed, relax, enjoy yourself. And after 3 hours of just like being in my robe and being under the covers and watching ridiculous things on the internet, and being able to smile, I was like, okay, I'm energized and I'm ready to roll and I'm ready to, let's build this cabinet thing that we're building.
Hmm.
Um, so that was really good. It was difficult because I felt bad. Like I didn't want to leave my husband alone to do this thing that we were going to do together. But
Hmm.
I'm very grateful that he understands. So the wellness win is one, I listened to my body and I responded, and my body was like, "Thank you." And two, my
Yeah.
wellness win is that I really married somebody who is like perfect for me. And
Yeah.
so yeah, I'm grateful for that.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that self-awareness. That I think is still so hard for some of us. Like we could be just cranky and in a bad mood and not realize why, not realize that it's because, hey, I just really need some rest. I'm really
Yeah.
like overwhelmed or overworked right now. And I could spend the whole day just cranky, or I could realize, hey, let me rest for a couple hours and then I can reclaim the rest of my day, you know? So it's so
Yeah.
beneficial to be able to have that self-awareness. Good job.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I
Yeah, yeah,
appreciate it. How
yeah.
about yours?
So mine is that I used to have such a great exercise routine, and I
Mm,
was like, you know, really good about this is what I do and this after work and blah blah blah. And then, you know, like 3 to 4 months ago, everything flew out the window because of all these stupid symptoms that I was having.
mm,
And now things are getting a little bit better, thank God. Well, a lot better. Not 100%, but definitely I've
mm,
been getting better. And so I've been like craving building that like structured workouts back into my routine as opposed to just like getting movement wherever I can. Because I've been still
mm,
trying to just get some movement, you know, walking and whatever I can do. But
mm,
so a few times in the last couple weeks, I was like, okay, I looked at like my schedule and I was like, okay, I think after work I have time today for like a real workout. Not real, but just a more structured workout. You know, I believe
mm.
any movement is good movement. I'm not like there's no hierarchy. This is a real workout and this isn't, but just
Yeah.
more of what I used to be doing. So I set out, you know, my workout clothes on the bed and it was like very much in my head. When I get home, I will change and I will do this workout. So that
Mm,
happened a few times and I've been able to like ease back in. I'm very far from what I was before, but I feel good just that I've been able to, you know, ease back in a little bit, being intentional about kind of trying to bring back that structure because it was so good for me. You know, it was just good for me, my mental health, it's good for my physical health.
yeah.
Um, yeah, so I'm excited to hopefully continue that moving forward.
Yeah.
My body hopefully will be nice and allow me to continue doing the things that I want to do and not
Yeah.
revolt, which I feel like is sometimes what it does. It's just like just like no, I don't like anything and you know, yeah.
Well, I'm glad that you're feeling better. That's great.
Thank
We're
you.
praying that you continue to feel better. And I think you're being really smart about how you're easing your way into working out. You're not like, cool, like time to go hard. You're like, okay, so
Mm-mm.
it's been a minute. So we're gonna just like slowly ease into this. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really tempting since you enjoy it and it's been a while, and you've been
Mm-hmm.
missing it. So good for you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so God willing, you know, we'll just keep going step by step. Yeah. But
Yep.
okay, that is kind of related to resilience, I think.
Mm.
Right? Like, yeah, I could have just abandoned the whole, you know, workout. It's not working out for me. My body hates me. And just stopped, you know, doing everything. But, you know, this ability to bounce back, right? I think
Yep.
that resilience is the ability to bounce back, to adapt to stressors, to be able to maintain, especially psychological well-being in the
Hmm.
face of difficulty.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So that's what resilience is. Again, being able to bounce back. Now, what I thought was interesting when I was thinking about this is like, are some people just naturally more resilient than others? What do you think? Is this just something
Mm.
that, like, oh, if I don't feel like I'm resilient, well, you know, oh, well, this is the genetics or whatever that I've been given, you know?
Mm. That's a really good question. I think there's a few underlying questions in that. One is people have different life circumstances, and some life circumstances will require resilience to come out of
Hmm.
it, right?
Yeah.
Versus other people who haven't had to deal with as much stress or trauma, they're not going to have to be resilient because they haven't dealt with that many things that have caused them to be resilient. So one question is, what's your life experience like? What's your history? That can tell you a lot. And two, I think another question is, how do you understand resilience? I think sometimes we understand resilience as like it looks like a specific way. Resilience means that it's my ability to bounce back. So that means that I'm really happy and I'm able to do everything and I'm able to keep my home in perfect harmony and all of the dishes are washed. And that's how I know that I am able to
Hmm.
be resilient. I would argue that that is not a correct definition of resilience.
Hmm.
That's not a correct manifestation of resilience. What I would say is resilience is when you are really able to manage those things and still essentially not completely tank in your well being. So the
Hmm.
daily things that you do for your functioning, You're still able to do them. It may not be perfect, right? Maybe you're not doing all 10 of them. Maybe you're only doing 8. Maybe you're not even doing all 8 as well as you used to, but you
Right.
are still doing it, right? Resilience is saying that you are still showing up. And there's things that we do to bolster our resilience, right?
Hmm.
For your physical health, you need to be physically well in order to be resilient because you literally need energy. You need
Yeah.
energy to sift through all of the stressors that's going on. You need energy to come up with solutions. You need energy to come up with spaces that make you feel safe to decompress and to unpack. All of those things are energy, right?
Hmm.
For what's happening right now in our country. It's very hard to have the energy to advocate or protest or write letters to your law officials if you do not have the energy to do those things.
Right.
So resilience does require a bit of wellness. It doesn't have to be 10, on level 10, it doesn't have to be that, but there still has to be like that little bit there. So I think those are the
Yeah.
real questions that we think about when we ask, is resilience really natural? I think those are the deeper underlying things that we think about. So I don't know, that's
Yeah.
me. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think that it's a skill. I mean, I agree. Some people have had no choice, based on their life circumstances to
Yep.
develop resilience maybe earlier, in their life than other
Mm-hmm.
people, if, some stuff happened in childhood. But I do think that it is a skill that can be developed just like any other skill, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if now as an adult, I don't feel like I'm super resilient, but life keeps throwing all this stuff at me. This is an opportunity for me to develop this skill, to practice it. It's just like any other skill that I can get better at. And
Mm-hmm.
what you were saying about like, it means that maybe do 8 things instead of 10 things or whatever it is. Yeah, I think the bottom line is it means we're not surrendering, right? So, like, when life hits really hard, like sometimes we just want to throw in the towel. We want to curl up
Mm-hmm.
into a ball and like just stop functioning. Like you said, the stuff that we do every day to function. Now, I do think that part of this journey is that maybe you do curl up into a ball for a
Mm-hmm.
time,
Yep.
right? That might be a little bit of wintering, kind of like what we were talking about last episode. But then again, the key is the bounce back, that we don't
Mm-hmm.
remain in fetal position, refusing to go to work, refusing to talk
Yeah.
to anybody, right? Refusing to move on with our lives. So that's the key to resilience, is that we don't throw in the towel, even if for a time we kind of shut down, that we have this ability to come back.
Hmm. That's a really good point. I think it makes sense um when people hear what you just said, which is like part of resilience is like, yes, you are going to maybe curl up and bawl your eyes out and be really mad and sad. That is
Hmm.
real. That is part of the resilience journey because that is showing that you have an understanding of the situation,
Yeah.
right? If you are witnessing a lot of difficulties, if you're witnessing the things that are happening in this world and you have no response to it, and you're just kind of like, okay, it's just like an average Tuesday. It is what it is. That shows honestly, a lack of understanding reality.
Hmm.
And by understanding the reality of the situation, you are going to have a response to that. This is very sad. This is awful. Oh, that causes me to just maybe I need to sit with myself a little bit more. Maybe I need to sit in prayer a little bit more than I usually do. Maybe I sit here and I actually cry and lament, which is literally
Yeah.
a biblical thing. And so those things are part of the resilience process. Right? If
Yeah.
we stay there for too long to a point where it's detrimental, to our
Right.
aspects of wellness, then yeah, then I think it's not so much resilience, it's so much giving it. But acknowledging the situation is part of resilience. Ignoring it and being like, I'm resilient, so I'm ignoring all the things that are
Hmm.
happening. No, that's called delusional disorder, and that's not actually going to serve you well, you know?
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I do think that could be misconstrued, that people think for me to be resilient is that I'm not impacted by what's happening to me,
Yeah.
right? That this bad thing happens to me, but I'm okay. I just push through. This bad thing is happening and I just keep pushing through. And what's going to happen, I feel like most of the time, to someone who's just ignoring all of this stuff that's happening to them, is they will at some point completely break down,
Yep.
potentially irreparably, right? Like just
Yep.
have a complete and total breakdown versus if you give yourself that opportunity. We've talked about this so much, including in last episode. Like if I allow myself the ability to grieve, to be sad, to be tired, to be hurt, whatever it is that I need to feel. And then the resilience part comes when I make a plan to move forward,
Yeah.
right? So, okay, like this horrible thing happened. I'm going to take the time to grieve, to lick my wounds, whatever you want to call it. But then here's what I can do to pick myself up and keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's I think that's very real. Um, I think resilience kind of battles against is this idea that we must look a certain way every day and we must be happy
Mm,
and strong, and strength looks like this every day. And really what you're talking about and what we're highlighting is that resilience doesn't look like that. Resilience looks like being real and authentic
mm,
and then
mm-hmm,
responding. Because if you are feeling so much underlying anger and stress, but you're not expressing it, and then you will just randomly pop off one day on perhaps something really small, right? And
mm-hmm,
if you're not
mm-hmm.
dealing with things that are stressing you out, your ability to problem solve decreases. Like that's just what research shows us.
Yeah.
When you are dealing with something stressful and you don't and it just kind of like stays there, your ability to process and move forward and go about your everyday life decreases. Because
Yeah.
stress hinders your ability for your body to do the things that it needs to do, because stress matters. Stress is impactful. Stress is heavy. And so acknowledging it, and instead of just shoving it down or just saying, well, everything is fine, or well, we just need to pray about it, right? Those
Mm-hmm.
things are not actually helpful. Prayer is, of course, always helpful, but prayer always, no, I don't want to say always, prayer should prompt you into some type of action.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's just kind of how it is. If we look in the Bible, when people pray, sometimes that action is like, okay, girl, I'm gonna need you to sit down and just chill out for 2 seconds. Sometimes that's the action when that person is ready to fight. But most of the time, that action is something that is a bit more active, because
Mm-hmm.
that's who God is. He's like, yo, I'm trying to partner with you so that you can do my goodness on the earth so that I am
Right.
glorified and that people will be saved. But if you're just sitting there praying, but you're not doing anything about it, and God's like, hey, like I'm gonna need
Yeah.
you to do that, you know? So
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know how we got here, but here we are.
Yeah.
Uh
Well, I mean, I think that goes along the lines of like the ultimate goal of resilience is to get better, right?
yeah.
Like, so, if I was here before the difficulty and then maybe again I ended up in a ball crying, but then eventually I should be able to, to progress, right? Like that maybe I can use my experience to gain insight, to gain wisdom, to ultimately get better. Instead of just having this horrible experience that taught me nothing.
Yeah.
So have you heard that phrase, don't get bitter, get better?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that really kind of encapsulates resilience, right? So we can just
Mm,
get bitter when bad things happen to us and end up, completely shutting down, or we can ultimately use the experience to get better. And I think
yeah.
if we learn the skills of resilience, and we're going to talk about like 5 ways to try to, improve our resilience,
Mm,
then I think that could be what happens. And it's never, maybe not never, but it's definitely not always so obvious, right? Like last month I had this horrible experience and now I feel like I'm so much more wise and and I feel like a better person. Sometimes this is like years and years and years later
yeah.
and a
Yeah.
cumulative effect, right? Of
Yes.
overcoming challenge after challenge after challenge. And maybe in 10 years you can look back and be like, oh yeah, I definitely feel like I've made progress, after all that I've gone through.
I'm glad that you brought up the timing part,
Yeah.
because especially for us impatient folks, we're like, well, that happened. I learned everything. Woo! Like A plus in resilience. And
Yeah.
God is like, no, honey, like this is a journey and it's in moderation. And we just take one movement at a time, at a time, at a time. So being patient in the journey. Resilience is not. I don't think resilience is like an endpoint where it's like, I have achieved resilience, like I'm
Yeah.
100% resilient. I don't think it's like that, but I do think that when you take time to process and reflect on your life, you'll be able to see things that you may not necessarily see if you didn't reflect. And that's when you notice areas of growth, like, hey, maybe you are becoming more resilient, right? Maybe the way
Mm-hmm.
that you dealt with that situation yesterday is very different than how you would have dealt with it years ago, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
So time is helpful, in my opinion, for
Yeah.
things like resilience.
And talk about a wellness win when you can
Mm,
recognize, hey, I handled this so much better than I would have a few years ago. Like that's huge, you know.
yeah.
Um, I don't, this is like tangentially related, but you brought up the idea of patience and it made me think, you know, that sometimes the things we go through and we wonder, why am I going through this? And a lot of times it's because God is trying to teach us something or he's trying
Mm,
to mold us, right? Like his goal for us is to be like Christ. And so a
mm,
lot of the things that we go through is so that he can mold us. And I heard this analogy, which is so great for me, especially as a teacher, that okay, if you're taking a test, right? Say that you fail, you know, your chemistry one class. Are you allowed to go on to chemistry two?
mm,
No, you cannot
mm,
take chemistry two until you pass chemistry one because there are a set of skills that you must know, right? That you must be able to master from Chem one before you can go on to Chem two. So you have to repeat the class, right? You got to repeat it over
mm,
and over again until you can pass the test. And I think it's kind of the same way that we sometimes go through things over and over and over and over again, right? For me, it's situations that require me to be patient, that require me to surrender because these are lessons that I know I haven't learned yet. I keep failing the test, right? So God's like,
mm,
okay, you got to take the class again. You know,
mm,
because this is vital for you, right? For the kind of woman that I'm trying to make you into, that you learn
mm,
this lesson of patience, this lesson of surrender. So I don't want this at
mm,
all to seem like God is mean at all, but I do think that some of the things that we go through, he allows and he uses for our development, right?
mm,
And
mm,
so if things keep happening, one of the reasons might be because we're still failing the test, right? So
mm.
I don't know. I liked that analogy a lot. It resonated with me, but I don't know how you
Yeah.
feel about it.
I think you bring up probably one of the most contested issues in our faith, which is why does God allow bad things to happen? And we could have a whole podcast series on that question alone.
Absolutely.
And
Hmm.
I think you're doing a good job of highlighting that if there's like a repetition of an issue, there's a really good chance that God is trying to get your attention about an area of growth. For
Yeah.
you and me, it's definitely patience, right? And I do think there's also some negative things that we experience that maybe isn't necessarily God is trying to like teach us something, but since God is so good, he will use anything
Use
that we
that. Hmm.
do to glorify him.
Hmm.
Right. And I forgot
Hmm.
where, but in the book of Romans, I don't know if it's 8, but it talks about how
You're right.
yeah, do you know the verse I'm talking about?
Yeah, I think so. 8:28. And he works all things for good for those who
Yes.
love God. Hmm.
Yes. And that's he's not God isn't creating narcissistic people. That is not the takeaway, which is what a lot of Christians like to take away. No. What the takeaway is that God is so dedicated to making sure that people on earth know him and love him that anything we experience, he's like, this is an opportunity
Hmm.
for XYZ person to get closer to me. This is an
Hmm.
opportunity for XYZ person to spread the gospel. Because that
Hmm.
is how dedicated he is. Oh, I feel like screaming. I'm not going to, but I think we miss that so much, you know? And it's hard because either we sin because of our own sin and our own hardships, or we sin because we have been on the other side of somebody else's sin. That's
Hmm.
hard. That's really hard. We don't know necessarily which one comes first. Really, only God knows that. Or if you work with a professional, they can help you sort that out. And so I think that idea of, when you're going through a trial or a tribulation, and that Christian grandma is just like, well, God is teaching you something, he's testing you. Perhaps, like, God may actually be teaching you something. Or you may just be dealing with a crappy situation, but God's
Yeah,
goodness will still be revealed in that. And
right,
resilience shows up in both of those things.
right. Yeah, I've heard the explanation that a lot of times bad things happen not because you did it or because God did it, but because the world is fallen,
Yeah.
and so bad things happen. But like you said, if we give it to him, right, he can use it for good. And if we are obedient, he can absolutely use it for good. He's super creative.
Yeah.
So maybe we can't see how could this horrible situation ultimately be for
Yeah.
God's glory or for my good, but he can see that, because
Oh,
his
absolutely. We're talking
super
about,
zoom out.
right. We're talking about the creator of the
Yeah.
universe.
Yeah.
He literally created the definition of creativity. You
Hmm.
think that he's gonna teach us something in a straight shoot way? No. I mean, he might if I don't know if that's what he really wants to do. But in my life and the life of people I know, that is not how he teaches us things. And
Yeah.
that the intricacy of it, though frustrating, it does help us fall in love with God even more.
Hmm.
Because if he is so well thought out and intentional and every detail matters to him, then what does that say about his character?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
yeah, I'm not going to go screaming and I'm not going to go on a tangent because I know we're here about resilience, but
we like
yeah,
tangents. I think tangents
we
can be
do.
very valuable. Yeah,
We
discussions.
are
So it's all
we're
right.
very tangent friendly here.
Yeah. I mean, if there's something that we like want to talk about that's interesting, like just talk about it. It's okay. We can always come back to resilience in another episode if we don't get to finish it. Like things are very easy, relaxed here. If it's a good conversation, it's a good conversation. I think that's all that matters. I try that in my classes. I try that same approach. It doesn't work. Like we'll just start
Oh,
having a great conversation, but like I got to get to the algebra. Like I have no choice. I must teach the and I get super disappointed. Like I'd really rather just keep chatting with them about, the Super Bowl halftime show or whatever it is that we're talking about.
yeah.
But, yeah. But here, I Connected Wellness Podcast, all conversations are good conversations. Yeah.
Yes.
So, okay. Should we go back? Speaking of class, I have 5 suggestions for you on how to increase your resilience, but it's not from me. I like experts. So I consulted the American Psychological Association, and these are their 5 suggestions for increasing wellness. And I don't think that they're groundbreaking at all, but I think they're great reminders. And
Mm,
we could see how um, so much goes into increasing our resilience. So
mhm.
the first one is connection, right?
Mm,
Making sure we build our social network with like people who can validate our experiences. Like, so think about what we talked about, our current situation here in the United States. So I know many people who are super struggling with literally everything that comes on the news these days. Everything
yeah.
is triggering them. And there's nothing that I can't do anything about what's happening, but I've noticed that if you just give them a safe space to vent,
Yeah.
right, to feel their feelings in a non-antagonistic environment, right?
Mhm.
So having some sort of connected network again allows us to have our emotions validated, and I think that's like a huge start to moving forward,
Yeah.
right? So that's just one of the many, many reasons that having a good network is important, but I think that's a big one.
Yeah, community is so crucial for so many reasons, and this is one of them because I'm thinking about hopefully there's people in your community that can give you that space to just vent, be mad.
Hmm.
Um, shameless plug. I actually have a service with my coaching business called the Righteous Rage Room. And basically what it is we get on a Zoom call and people just vent and I just validate and I listen. I'm not giving, I mean, I actually do give them a guide later of like different resources, journaling stuff, even like YouTube videos that are like other type of like rage stuff that makes you just like feel good. Um, all holy. So I know we hear rage
Mhm.
and we freak out, but this is righteous rage. And one of the reasons why I created it is because having space is unfortunately quite rare. And so having people in your community that you can just have that space with and they validate and they
Mhm.
sit there and they're like, yeah, this is actually quite awful. And they don't offer solutions. They don't belittle your situation. They don't say,
Yeah.
well, this is not something for you to worry about because this is, you know what I mean? They just sit there and they listen and they empathize. I think another thing, though, that makes community so helpful is they can encourage you. They can
Yeah.
remind you about your qualities of being resilient, of how resourceful you are, right? So once you're done with the venting or the
Mhm.
righteous rage room, yeah, once you're done with that, and you feel like you're in a place to be proactive in a different way as being part of the solution, your community can give you resources. They can be like, oh, hey, like these are the law officials we should be contacting. Here's the issues that I'm contacting them about. Do you
Mhm.
want a draft of my letter? Here's a petition website that is like really credible. Here's like a nonprofit that's like doing really great work. So sharing resources, right? Community is very helpful for that. And they can also give you reminders of, hey, girl, you've been doing a lot today. Maybe you need to rest.
Mhm.
You know, God bless my clients, but pretty much every single one of my clients have been like, hey, like before we get into the session, how are you, Rachel? Like this must be really hard. Like it must be really hard to be in your occupation during this time.
Mhm.
And I was like, yes, it is. I was like, I appreciate your prayers. I was like, I have my self-care, I have my community, I have my prayer. Thank God, like I have that. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to show up for anybody, including myself.
Yeah.
And so having people to check in on you and give you the space that you need and then remind you of who you are and how your values and your skills and how you yourself matter. That's
Yeah.
empowering. So that way you are being resilient from a place of empowerment, not a
Yeah.
place of frustration or a place of, well, it's either this or this is the only thing I can do to continue to survive, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
communities, whew, we talked about
Yeah.
community. I feel like
Yeah.
we had a whole episode on it,
I think
right?
we did. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, no,
very
yeah,
passionate
it's
about it.
super important. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I like that it's like for both of those things to be able to kind of absorb, right, the venting and be a safe space for you to just say how you feel, but also
Mm.
to give encouragement, like you said. Yeah. I feel like
Mm.
I've been getting so much better at the first part of that, because my,
Mm.
first instinct is always to be like, no, it's okay, no, but I realize that sometimes that's not what people need. And I just
Yeah.
listen and validate, be like, yeah, that really sucks, like
Yeah.
I'm really sorry, that really does suck.
Yeah.
Yes, this is really scary, yes, this is pretty awful. So I that's a wellness win for me, is that I've been getting so much better at that, I think.
Good job,
And I
Arian.
could see how people are responding to that.
Yeah.
Okay, so connection number one. Number two, you touched on this, is like overall wellness, right?
Mm.
The healthier we are, again, spiritually, mentally, physically, the easier we're going, not easier, but the more likely we're going to be able to withstand these kind of outside forces that are hurting us. Like, I
Mm.
cannot understate the importance of fueling your body properly and getting
Yeah.
enough sleep. Like those
Oh,
two things, like,
girl.
for some people, I almost feel like would solve 75% of their emotional
Mm-hmm.
issues. You know what I mean? Like if you
Mm-hmm.
would just take care of your body properly, because it's so interconnected, which we've talked about
Yeah.
before. Like if your body is having some sort of breakdown, is not getting what it needs, it will very much affect your mind and affect your ability to regulate emotions and problem
Yeah.
solve and all of these things. So if you feel like you're in the middle of, an assault of all kinds of problems, which literally all of us are, then that's a good reminder to take care of yourself. Spiritually, of course, our faith provides us hope. It provides meaning to our lives, right? Like, knowing that God is with us, it helps us understand that there's a bigger picture, right? Like we were talking
Mm.
about, like everything is for his glory. Um, and then physical and emotional, of course, I think are obvious, but I'm going to talk more about our thoughts in a minute. But yeah, do you have anything else to add about wellness?
Yeah, what's so interesting about how sleep and staying hydrated really is kind of like the basics, y'all. I have a Fitbit, and my Fitbit tells me something called a stress score, which I'm like, what is this stress score? Like, how are you able to tell me this? And so far, it's been actually pretty spot on, but it assesses your ability to manage stress. And
Mm,
it says that one of the biggest factors it looks at is your history of sleep for a certain period of time. And I notice when I don't get much sleep, it's like, ooh, your stress score is down. That means your ability to deal with stress is lower. And I'm like, oh,
yeah.
that makes sense of why I had like a really crappy day today. I'm convinced the days that I don't sleep well, or the nights that I don't sleep well, that next day, my knees hurt again.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
there's just something about my body's like, we didn't get enough time to
Yeah.
rest and rejuvenate and heal.
Right.
So, bam, here you go. Have some pain.
Yeah.
And we just don't have the ability to process. So, I think that's real. And what I'm also thinking about too is our faith. I think something that makes it difficult to be in these treacherous times is that a lot of the messages we're seeing from people of faith is what we call spiritual bypassing, which is kind
Mm,
of like what Marian was talking about, which is when people are not validating, but they do it by misusing scripture. So it's like, well, there's a
hmm.
purpose to everything, right? That's not helpful right now. But I like what you're alluding to because the Bible talks about injustice, right? Psalm 109 is like a psalm that goes hard. That's like, God, injustice is happening. May your justice come down like from heaven now. People who are doing evil, call them to repent. But if they're not trying to repent, then God, take them out of these places so that they stop doing evil. Like it is like the real deal. That's one reason why I love the Psalms is because it's emotional in nature,
Hmm.
which shows us that God cares about our emotions. And so if you are somebody that is having a hard time right now and you are finding lots of spiritual spaces to just say, "Oh God, it'll be okay. Like God is with you and so you don't have to worry about these things." And it basically just things that aren't helpful. Look to the Bible. Do a Google
Yeah.
search of like, how does God respond to injustice? How does God hear our prayers? And be reminded that he not only does he hear our prayers, he responds.
Yeah.
And so he does not like injustice. We have so many examples of that in the Bible. And for the
Yeah.
things that it seems like are just going awry right now with no justice happening, God is the righteous judge. And so
Hmm.
when they come face to face with him, that like I don't want to be there for that conversation. That doesn't seem
Yeah.
really great. So that's why we pray for their repentance. And what does the Bible say? Turn away from your wickedness and live. That's what we
Yeah.
want, right? While
Yeah.
we're praying for protection of the marginalized, while we're praying for resources for those who are in danger. So leaning on our faith is important. It also can be hard when a lot of the things that we learn from maybe I love our previous generations, but maybe the previous generations aren't really super helpful
Hmm.
in boosting our resilience. They're kind of doing like,
Hmm.
yeah, it's okay, don't worry about it. It's like that's
Hmm.
not how
Hmm.
God commands us to show love to our neighbor.
Yeah. 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 That's, I think, a whole episode. Biblical justice might need to be a whole episode.
Girl, don't get me started.
Yeah.
That okay, we can do that. I'm happy to go there. It might get
Yeah.
a little bit uncomfortable, y'all might see a little different side of me. I'm a little buttoned down, but not buttoned down, buttoned up when I come here. But we can talk about it. I'm ready. I got my water. I'm ready. I work out. I'm energized. I got this.
Oh boy. All right. Let's make sure you get enough sleep first though, so that,
Girl, that's real.
yeah,
Yeah.
all of
Let me get
the
back to you on
the
that.
cognitive functioning is like, top notch for that.
Yeah.
All right. So we said connection, wellness. We'll do
Hmm.
these last few kind of quickly. Purpose. So having a sense of purpose, whether
Yeah.
it's for our own problems, right? So kind of being proactive and tackling, making a plan like, okay, so like we said before, this horrible thing happened. Let me be really sad about it for a while, but then let me be proactive and make a plan, so I can make things better. But also in helping others. Like I can't overstate this enough. When things
Mm,
are going wrong for you will feel better when you help other people,
mm,
right? It's maybe about a perspective shift. It's about, the feelings of gratitude that you get when you're able to
mm,
help other people. Like, I promise it works. I'm sure there's a whole bunch of psychology behind it, but I have seen it work for me over and over and over again, right? So,
yeah.
like, instead of just sitting there and being miserable, like, get up and do
Mhm,
something, whether for yourself or for others.
mhm.
Also, it does help us kind of see that there are things within my control,
Yep.
when I am able to be proactive again, either for myself
Yeah,
or for others.
that's a good
Um,
one.
the fourth one is kind of healthy thinking. So this really does fall under the umbrella of like emotional or mental wellness, but some of the kind of thoughts that we can think about is like keeping things in perspective. So sometimes when something happens, some of us have a tendency to catastrophize,
Mm,
right? So, sometimes it is one of the worst things that could ever happen. But maybe let me ask myself, is this as bad as I'm making it out to be? So again, put
mm,
it into perspective. How much of a problem is this really? Again, what can I actually control versus what can I not control? We've talked about that. And then just like we talked about last time, this idea of expecting uncertainty, right? Or expecting change. I love this. I thought about this. So if we can be flexible, right, expecting that things are
mm,
going to happen that we don't understand, how does that help me be resilient? So
mm,
imagine if you have a piece of plastic, right, like a just a soft piece of plastic, or if you have a piece of glass. If both of those objects get hit by some force, the plastic will just bend, right, and then go back, right? It's okay.
mhm.
It'll just bend and go back. Like, it's flexible, it's adaptable, right? Versus the glass is going to shatter because it
Yeah,
has no give, right? So expecting that things are going to happen, expecting the unexpected, being flexible, allows us to be more resilient because, we can just bounce back. We don't have rigid beliefs that if something challenges those rigid beliefs, like, we're completely shattered.
mm, that's a really good one. I know we're landing the plane, um, but I think that's a really great reminder of something that we love called neuroplasticity.
Mm, so much love for that. Yes.
I'll leave it there because I know we need to wind down, but neuroplasticity is wonderful. Check all of our podcast episodes if you don't know what it is. But neuroplasticity and resilience, they go hand in hand. It's our brain making new connections and is being like, yeah, we are learning, we are adapting, and we are growing. And resilience is a
Hmm.
beautiful picture and representation of what neuroplasticity can lead to.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Um, okay, the last one, which we always throw in here as well, is like, you don't have to do all this by yourself. Like, seek help if you need it,
Yes.
right? From a professional, from your community, from your network. But like, yeah, so sometimes it can be hard to develop these skills of resilience, or maybe there is something happening, a terrible loss, a terrible stressor that you're just feeling like, I cannot bounce back from this by myself.
Yeah.
That's okay. Nothing's wrong with you, right? Feel free, to seek help from a professional for that. So always want
Yeah.
to throw that out there.
Yep.
There's a lot that we can do for ourselves. There's a lot that we can learn and a lot of ways that we can make ourselves healthier, but we don't have to do everything by ourselves.
Exactly. And we're not expected to. God
Hmm.
doesn't expect you to pick yourself up by your bootstraps. That is not something that he designed. That is not something that you will find in the Bible. We're meant to be in community and to receive support. Um, wow. This was a really great episode. I typically like all of our episodes. But I don't know, I really like this one. And we would really love to hear from y'all. What does resilience look like for you right now? And also, what are things that we can be praying for and rooting you on for? And do you want us to talk about biblical justice? Let me know so I can make sure I take my melatonin, I drink my tea, and I'm just ready for y'all. I'd be taking my notes for that one. So let us know your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you want to contact us on Instagram, you can totally do that. We're there at Connected Wellness Podcast. We're also on Facebook at Connected Wellness Podcast. You can email us if you'd like at connectedwellnesspodcast wabasabas@gmail.com. If you want to reach out to Marianne specifically, she's on Instagram at wabasaba. If you want to reach out to me specifically, I'm at Real with Rachel Ann. Come join me in the Rage Room. Shameless plug. Um, yeah, we're here for you. We're rooting for you, and we're grateful to be on this journey with you. And
Absolutely.
I'll hand it on over to Mary to the Ann.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode, and we hope to see you next time. Until then, be well.
Yes, be well, everybody. Bye.